And welcome back. With so much focus and attention, obviously, on reopening the country and the economy, despite the pandemic, we are going to take now a look at the state of some key American industries, some of which were frankly hurting even before COVID hit. A reminder, just because businesses reopen, it doesn't mean that customers will follow. I'll remind you of a new poll out, and it says, if restrictions were lifted tomorrow, 80% of Americans would not yet feel comfortable to go to a restaurant, a movie, or a house of worship. It's going to take a long time before consumers feel that bold again. And that is going to be a problem for every industry, but especially for the retail sector, which has already been hurting before the virus. And this sector is a huge, huge deal. 29 million Americans are directly employed by retailers. Another 42 million jobs are at least partly dependent on it, making it one of the 10 largest employment sectors in the U.S. Retail, it generated more than $1 trillion and pumped another $3 trillion into other areas like wholesalers and manufacturing. And people, they were already throwing dirt on retail even before the virus hit. Back in 2017, Credit Suisse, they estimated the quarter of all American malls would close by 2022, with 100,000 individual stores closing by 2025. And the virus, it has only put that trend on steroids. Now, most American malls, they have been closed now for a month, if not even longer. Department store Neiman Marcus, they announced it'll file for bankruptcy. That could happen this weekend. JCPenney looking to borrow $1 billion so it can keep its stores open after it declares bankruptcy, and it's a move that could happen any day. Macy's, they could soon follow. It is looking to borrow about $5 billion to try and stave off bankruptcy. Retailers, they were already losing a lot of business to, you guessed it, Amazon, and that's only accelerated with stores closing. But Amazon, they've got their own problems. They're facing challenges from worker safety, rights complaints, distribution, delivery, and supply chain problems, all impacted by the pandemic. For more, let's bring in our guest, Burt Flickinger. Burt is Managing Director of SRG Insight. It's a consulting firm that focuses on the retail industry. Burt, appreciate a few minutes. Thank you.
Appreciate teaming up, Richard. Thank you.
You coined a really good term. It's accelerating retail ice age. And maybe I'm, exhibit A for it. I never like to order anything online, but obviously the last month forced my hand here a little bit. And now I don't know when the veil finally lifts here and we go back to whatever normalcy will look like, if I'll consume the same way or if I won't, click on the mouse here and pick stuff online. Is that the bigger danger for retail? Is that consumption habits are being forced to change in real time because of the pandemic? Or is it when the pandemic goes away, it'll go back to the way it was?
Richard, you brought up the 4 key points and quickly. Number one, in our strategic resource group forecast in 2015 for an accelerating retail ice age, you mentioned U.S. being overstored. We're going from 400% overstored to about 140% overstored. So, as you referenced, we'll go from 10,000 stores closing a year to 20,000 stores closing a year. And 3, the important point of customer counts and concerns it being in malls. And then 4, your key point on the failures of Amazon. Bloomberg reported 38 hours ago that Amazon's price gouging, plus consumers are upset along with competitors and suppliers going back for years, and reported anti-competitive practices and predatory prices. So Amazon, in our research, has been the biggest failure for delivery. And the good news is there's a proverbial retail requiem for the independent food retailers who were struggling for viability before that. Now they're surviving. They're really thriving. It's like Charles Dickens in the first line of Tale of Two Cities. It's the worst of times. It's the best of times. For food retail, it's the best of times. Shoppers will go back to food retail first. As you referenced, well, they'll be concerned about going movies, restaurants, and other retailers that are only selling clothes, accessories, hard goods, and soft goods.
Burt, I learned a few things in getting ready for this. One, which you knew intuitively, but just how many people will be harmed if retail is damaged even after we come back here, how many people are impacted. And then it's not just the jobs, which are bad enough. As you point out, these major retailers, they're the source of tax revenue for cities that rely on it. And if they're not paying, it's going to impact your school districts, et cetera here. There's a whole daisy chain of impacts if retail takes a beating.
Richard, your key reference point of a chain, it's on a 360-degree basis, as you said well at the outset, close to 30 million people employed directly at retail, and then another 20 million between goods and services, from truck driving to warehousing to fashion to food. That retail's at risk. The consumer spending is 70% of the economy. Retail's the biggest part of that. That's at risk. So to your point, we're seeing a problem, and part of it goes back to the last 25 years of poor government by both parties. The book was written by John Rothschild, Going for Broke, and the massive collapse of the malls and the department stores by the Wall Street and private equity firms and the bankruptcy lawyers getting greedy and impairing all these chains.
And for me, Burt, listen, I'll speak to something I know better, and that is on the media side. This canard here that, oh, well, you know what, let newspapers die out, no harm, no foul, we'll do this all digitally. It's a crock, because that's where the granular reporting rule comes from. That's where we got a lot of information. This idea that basically screw retail, we'll just do everything digitally online. We lose a lot as a country, not just the jobs attached to it, but it's part of the glucose of this country. I'm afraid people are just kind of moving it to the side, where this is, I guess, the benefit of technological advancement, but it comes at such a steep cost.
Richard, you're making the ideal comparison to media and the commercial and personal and community consequences. Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway's biggest deal and most successful first deal was buying the Buffalo Evening News, which he sold a couple months ago. And the newspaper advertising from all of the retailers, to your key point, Richard, the supporting of the community and the jobs, that's the heart and soul of communities, Richard, to your point, is the media, the newspapers, the print. It can't go to digital. And how the Federal Trade Commission and the SEC has been letting these online companies get away with killing communities, economies, companies, and viability of people's jobs for the rest of their lives is just seems like institutional insanity and criminality, while Wall Street gets rich and everybody at Main Street's going back to the recession and potentially the Great Depression of the 30s.
The only thing I'd ask the audience is, I know we're dealing with a generational challenge in front of us, but we have choices as to what we're going to look like when we come out on the other side. And as Burt's been echoing, if you care not just broadly about the term retail, but the stores that you know personally and what commerce will look like on the other side of it, we kind of all have to, don't take this sitting down. But Burt, I appreciate a few minutes with you. Thank you so much.
Richard, appreciate your outstanding insights and your great RNN team.
Up next, it is one of the simpler pleasures people say they've missed most since we all started staying at home. I'm talking about eating out at a restaurant. But the question is, will people be too scared once they can actually leave home? What will this mean here for the massive industry moving forward? We're going to talk to the chef owner of New York-based restaurant company about that very question when we come back.